Well, welcome back to the Orbit Church / Down to Earth podcast. We kind of mix it. We didn't want to start up a new account with Spotify. We're not that big of a deal yet, so we want to just keep it chill. But we recognize that the down to earth nature of our conversations has been sparse lately. And so what we want you to know is our whole goal in this podcast is not to put out something weekly. Our goal is to put out content over time that would present to you later a library of beliefs, values, conversations, things that will help you. Maybe if you're new to the church and you want to get connected, or if you've been going to the church and you're like, what do we believe about this stuff? We've got this stuff accessible. And if there's one thing I know, is that I'm not as good in writing as I am in person. And so I'd rather you hear my heart than see the text and, get offended because I was a little too direct. My wife, sometimes she gets really frustrated when I text her, and I'm not a long texter. She writes books anytime she texts me something, but I don't do that. And so I want to, present the best foot forward for Orbit Church, and I want to introduce you to some people. First off, if you don't know him already, we got Carez. You're going to have to yell what's up. We don't have a microphone. That's okay. We ran out of XLR cables today, but we'll have one next time. Well, next time we record. Carez is our worship leader. He's super dope. He sounds way better at singing than I ever did. And we want to introduce you to a new guest. We've never had him on the podcast in the library before. His name is Lawrence Haley. He is married to Courtney Haley. He's got 2 kids. One of his sons is one of my kids' good friends. They FaceTime together. So that tells you what kind of parents we are. Parents who allow our kids to face.
Non-stop, too. They're still on the phone together?
Eat that mic, my friend.
Yeah, they're still on the phone together?
Here, I'll push it closer. There we go.
There we go.
Hey, we got to teach people on the podcast how we do stuff. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let them talk some too, mostly Lawrence, because we don't have an XLR cable for Carez's microphone over there. But he's going to be looking up stuff for me like the Joe Rogan podcast, which I was listening to today, and I got really frustrated. There was a guy on there who's like an atheist, and he was making argument after argument, and he came back to the same thing I get frustrated about. I digress, but it was about the problem of evil. And we're not going to solve it because we're not God. But anyways, he was saying God didn't exist, and I got a little triggered. So I'm going to stop before I talk too much about that without preparation. What we're going to do over the next couple of weeks, though, is I want to open up a conversation, Lawrence and Carez, about our values. We did one a while back on what I would call our gateway value, accessibility. You want to go check that out. If you go to our YouTube or Spotify, but if you go to our YouTube and look at our playlist, you'll see the Down to Earth podcast playlist. You'll be able to find our value of accessibility. It's a 20-minute podcast. It's worth a listen. It's pretty funny. This was before we launched the church, and I talked a lot about what it looks like to be accessible and how Christ was accessible. But we're going to go into some of our other values. And so, Carez, will you do me a favor as we get started? I'm going to have Lawrence introduce himself. But will you look up our values on the website? If you want to look them up, it's orbitchurch.org/about. You'll see our beliefs and our values. But while he's doing that, Lawrence, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, so been Lawrence Haley. Backstory is traveled from Ohio, born in Ohio, over here to Arizona for a while, and then back to the Midwest, back to Ohio. Now I'm back in Arizona again. So that's been a journey of over the last 10 years, I guess. Just, once or twice across the country.
So all right, so check this. The way we met Lawrence is I went and preached at a church called Rock Point on the East Valley. If you're not in Phoenix, the East Valley is about an hour and 20 minutes away from me here in Buckeye. But he lives further into Buckeye at a place called Tartesso. So it's probably an hour and a half minimum for you to get. He was driving back and forth every week to Rock Point. Well, I preach over there. He's like, oh, a church down the street? Okay. And so he joined our launch team, and now he's one of the leaders on our team. He leads our usher team, but he does a lot of other stuff, and apparently he's jumping onto the podcast. And he's somewhat of a political commentator, but we're not going to do that on this podcast.
Not today. Not today.
Oh, but it's fun. It's fun stuff. But Lawrence, super glad to have you on the team. Carez, will you do me a favor? And this will be the title of our podcast for this first round. What value are you going to choose for us today, Carez? I'll repeat it for you. Ooh. All right, here's the value. Good. We are on even on our off days. On even on our off days. Now, I said this in our accessibility conversation, but when we talk values, we're not talking necessarily beliefs that we believe get us to heaven. Goodness gracious, Jesus died on the cross for that stuff. He forgave us of our sins, and he raised to walk to validate our life of abundance and our trust in him and our eternity with him, right? So Jesus did what was necessary for us to have an abundant life and an eternal life. But when we talk values, we're saying what as a church comes together and maybe delineates us from other churches you might have been a part of. And so this value, we are on even on our off day. Lawrence, what do you think that means?
So it's heavy, but it's heavy, but it's not. So in my opinion, the way I look at things is this. Are you making a commitment or are you making an emotional decision? So being on your off day means no matter what you're going through emotionally, did you make a decision prior to that emotional impact or prior to that emotional thing that's going on that, hey, my decision and my commitment I made overrides that emotional event that's going on right now? Or even if it's not an emotional event, it can be some kind of chaotic event in your personal life. And I get it. And I'm not saying that, oh, yeah, forget everything that's going on personally and just ignore it. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying you made a commitment to make a decision, to be dedicated and to be available when you said you were going to be available. So to me, being on your off day means, hey, you've already made this commitment prior to the things that are coming up, prior to the things that are going on in your life. And are you going to stay committed and you're going to stay to your word? So that's how I look at that one, man. Yeah. Like it's like, you know, what are you? I heard one thing one time before, and there was someone talking about allegiance versus loyalty. So, and I look at that saying like allegiance is you're going to be aligned with something as long as everything suits you. Like as long as everything's good and everything is the way you want it, you're aligned with it. You're going to have your allegiance to it. But loyalty means we're in it together. No matter what's going on, no matter what's happening, no matter how I feel about this personally, whether I agree with it or not, I've decided to be loyal to this cause or to the word of God or to whatever it's going to be. If it's going to be Orbit Church, it's going to be Orbit Church. It's going to be your personal church. It's going to be your personal church wherever you go. But are you going to be loyal to that and not be deterred, not be swayed by other things that are going on or how you might personally feel right now?
Yeah.
So that's that difference between, hey, you can have those off days, but are you still being loyal to what you said you were going to be loyal to?
Yo, Carez, I think we finally found someone who can have a conversation with me. This is good stuff. We're going to have to clip that one. Man, I love that. Loyalty versus, you said allegiance?
Yeah, loyalty versus allegiance.
That's good stuff. I pledge allegiance to the flag, but I'm loyal to my God. Yeah. Dude, that's good stuff. Chris is shaking his head over there. He says Matt's preaching over there. I'm going to shake my head. You know, it's funny. Y'all want the Old Testament or New Testament example?
Let's go Old Testament. Starting old and then go new.
All right. All right, I love this. So, Old Testament example, there's a story. It's in 1 Samuel. There's a guy named Jonathan. Turns out that's David's best friend. But there's a story of Jonathan who he wants to kind of tackle a Philistine garrison. I'm simplifying it real quick. And he's got his armor bearer. Now, the armor bearer was someone who was generally assigned to someone of higher level or rank or authority in their military operation. So this armor bearer would bear the armor, right? He would carry the armor and weapons for the person who would be doing the fighting. So you've got this scene where he's trying to tackle this garrison, and it's just him, his armor bearer, and a bunch of people on top of a ravine. And Jonathan says to the armor bearer, he says, we should do this. Perhaps the Lord will work on our behalf. And the armor bearer, I don't know what kind of day the armor bearer was having. Dude could have woke up frustrated because nobody followed him to the edge of the ravine. He's looking up. They got the high ground. He's wondering what's going to happen. And Jonathan, being crazy, hanging out with David too much, is like, we should tackle this ravine. And you know what he says? He doesn't say, oh, I'm tired today. He doesn't say, no, I don't feel like it today. He doesn't say anything negative. What he says is, whatever is on your heart, I'm with you, heart and soul. And I don't say that because I want people just to follow me, heart and soul. I say that because when God invites us into his kingdom, into his mission, which is to go therefore unto all nations, making disciples and baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Even then, I'm with you until the end of the age. When he says that, he's saying, come with me on this mission. He didn't say only on your good days. Yeah. is on both. I mean, you work at Amazon, right?
Yeah.
But you work. I don't know what high up is on Amazon. Like you're somewhere below Jeff Bezos, right?
Yeah, a little below him.
Somewhere below that, about to go to some pod or whatever they call it. But you manage a lot of people, right? And when you come in, there are people that are counting on you to have your stuff together. But do you always feel like going in?
Not at all.
What's your shift?
Not at all.
Tell them your shift.
So I work 5 p.m. at night until 6 a.m. in the morning. So 4 days a week. Technically 10-hour shifts, but we're really there into 12, 13 hours.
Yeah, and you got to be putting out, getting stuff down the belt. I don't know if it's a conveyor belt.
Yeah,
we
got conveyance everywhere.
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah. You got to make it happen.
Yep.
And sometimes you come in and you're just dead tired. You didn't have a good day, but what do you do? This is a good piece of advice for anybody. What do you do to stay on when you're off mentally or emotionally at work?
So kind of what you were just talking about. That people are relying on you, so you have to say that, hey, look. There are people who are looking for me to be an example. And that's honestly the biggest thing, because I look at it and say, as a leader, if I'm not the example that I expect out of my direct reports, then they have excuses now, and they can literally say, oh, Lawrence didn't feel good, so Lawrence didn't come in. Or Lawrence was tired, so Lawrence slacked off today. So people are looking at you as an example and as a leader. So what you want and what you expect, you have to display those same characteristics.
Yeah. So
that's how I kind of look at it. And that's my approach, is like, hey, look, even if I don't feel like right now doing X, Y, Z, I know that eyes are on you.
Yeah.
And I know eyes are on me. So it's like, hey, I have to be that example that I want folks to emulate.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my approach on it.
Dude, it works at home too. Because maybe I had a hard day. And I want you to know this. I want you to know, because we've only been at church for 6 months, which means we built a launch team, and then we launched the church, and now we're strolling through it every single week. It's a grind sometimes. Sometimes, like this week, someone and I, we had a hard conversation. And after that conversation, there's a little like discouragement. But then I come home and my kids had a decent day at school, and all they wanted to do was play with me. They just wanted my attention. And so sometimes when you come home from work, you got to be on even when it was an off day, because your kids are counting on you, because your kids look up to you. And every moment that you spend with kind of this negative headspace, being off, like, we get it. Like, your kids don't get it. Your kids don't get it. But, like, your spouse might get it. People get it. We know it's hard sometimes, and sometimes you need to just take a little break and go care for yourself. But when you come home, and your kid just wants to play with you because they love you and they want a good example of what it looks like to I don't know, just live life properly, you got to give them your attention. Even, dude, sometimes I'm ready to turn in the towel. Not all the way, but like I'm ready to turn in the towel and just go to sleep, go chill, go binge on a Netflix show. But my kid's here, so I gotta give you the New Testament one. Got to give you the New Testament one. There's a scene in the New Testament, and it's kind of articulated in a couple different Gospels. But what happens is Jesus has been doing his ministry for a little while, and his cousin John the Baptist, he gets his head cut off by Herod, the one that lives up in Galilee. I'm like, is it Archelaus? I think it's Herod Archelaus. I'm not sure. But anyways, Herodias' daughter dances, and then y'all know the story maybe. But she dances, and then Herod promises to give a gift, and they ask for John the Baptist's head. And John the Baptist was a great minister, cousin of Jesus. Anyways, he gets his head cut off. That's the long story short. And afterwards, Jesus is like, he's saddened. Like, this is someone who we know in post is his main predecessor, the person who would prepare the way of the Lord. So to God on high and Jesus relationally, John the Baptist was the greatest man that ever lived, and he died. And so Jesus goes out with his disciples into the wilderness in order, we would assume, to pray, to spend some time fasting and mourning. But what happens? 5,000 people from the cities and towns follow him out into the wilderness. And when they get there, it doesn't say that Jesus got frustrated and said, can you guys just go back? Seriously. No, it says he had compassion on them. In fact, at church, the posture we want to have is that the mission is more important than sometimes my mental state. The mission is so crucial. And if our mission is to help people who don't know their left hand from their right, if our mission is to help people who are on the verge of divorce in their relationships, people who are struggling to parent their kids, people who are frustrated at work and lacking purpose, people who who just in every aspect of the word are frustrated or living in dysfunction, man, we want to help them know Jesus who can give them peace. That mission is important. So how can I not have the same level of compassion that Jesus had on those people when they came on his off day? And so I think it's so crucial for us. And I think there's no better person than Lawrence to tell you guys how that plays out at church. So can you give me an example of a time where you had to be on, even on your off day, at church?
Oh, man.
Too many to count.
Yeah, right? No. It's not that bad. But we've had, and I think it's about being flexible too. You know, like part of that goes into being flexible. So we have many instances, several instances. We had several instances where we come into church and the equipment's not there.
Yeah.
For example, I'll also go here. One time we came in and so all of our equipment was all locked up in our storage facility. And we couldn't get into the storage facility.
Yeah, the code wasn't working.
The code wasn't working.
That was stressful.
So we're all sitting there, like I said, now the potential off day is right there. We're automatically, you would think, set up for failure. You go into it from an emotional perspective, like, oh, man, we're walking into this day set up for failure. But then, we start to ad lib and ad hoc. We're like, all right, cool. We do have pipes and drapes here? Yeah, we have pipe and drape. This is the day we built the big, tall wall.
Yeah.
We're like, all right, let's build a wall back here because we don't have everything we have. We have some of our stuff.
Using bleachers?
Yeah, we're using all kinds of stuff, turning things around. But it's a matter of figuring out, hey, how are we going to – I like how Pastor Matt says all the time, how are we going to figure this stuff out? So how do we figure it out, and how do we still serve, and how do we be on even in the face of that challenge? So, that just got to be –
Bro, no, it's so
ready
true.
And agile.
And dude, I know anyone who's married, they're going to wake up, they're going to try to get their kids ready to come, whether it's leading, serving, or attending, and the kids were screaming, and your spouse is frustrated at you, and you're both just trying to get to church, but you're like, I don't know about today, but you're like, no, I'm going to make it to church, but then you're arguing the whole way, and then you show up, and then you see people who are smiling at you and waving at you, and you're like, stop waving at me. You don't even know where I came from. I just came from yelling at my spouse. They were yelling at me, and we're just angry today. Stop messing with me. But when we get there, God can do something. And so many times when we're serving, it might not have been a good entrance into the room, but we can actually turn the temperature in order to make it or just adjust it in a way that God can use it. And so we just have to choose that day, that moment, who we're going to serve. Am I going to serve my emotions, or am I going to serve my Lord? Or am I going to serve that mission? Or am I going to be honoring of the people who came here who may have a worse situation than me? One of my biggest frustrations, Lawrence and Perez, is when someone said this to me recently. We were talking about financial situations, and I was just trying to walk them through it, and they looked at me and they said, Matt, you don't know what I'm going through. You're doing okay financially. And I about flipped the lid because that person don't know me. And this is what happens when we're off and act off on our off day. What we're forgetting is the fact that someone may have it worse than us, but we're so consumed in our own thought process that we're incapable of being what somebody else needs because we're stretching out and reaching for what we think we need. And it frustrates people around us, and ultimately it doesn't bring you the peace you want. So actually one of the best ways to be on your off day is to choose serving, is to choose the other person, trusting that God's going to bless you in due time. Yeah. And we can talk about this all day, but that's just I think it's such a great value for us because there have been too many moments where we had a bad day or we didn't get any sleep the night before. But you know what? If Jesus can be on, I'm going to be on. Yeah.